pleasure to once again present Heather McHugh.
Thank you kindly. Yeah, from Braintree to Alewife. It's like to come back to Boston is like the story of my life. It's like I start in Wonderland, I wind up in Braintree in Cambridge, and now Alewife forever. Going to school in Boston also ruined me for onion rings anywhere else. I've discovered that they don't seem to understand it's not a zero, a kind of obese zero. It's a halo. It's a light halo. I'm going to read some poems that alternate sort of innocence and experience poems. I'll start with Innocence, as so many of us do, which sometimes goes under its other name, ignorance. I learned a lot of techie vocabulary recently by studying the old MIT jargon file, now renamed the Hacker's Dictionary. And all due honors here go to Guy L. Steele, Jr., the author of the Hacker's Dictionary, and Eric S. Raymond, who, because you can take things online, that's its ethos and philosopher's stone, is the author of the new Hacker's Dictionary, from whose lyrical lexicons these clarifications derive. Hackers can sidejack cookies. A beige toaster is a maggot box. A bit bucket is a data sink. Farkled is a synonym for hosed. Flamage is a weenie problem. A berserker wizard gets no score for treasure. In muds, one acknowledges a bonk with an oif. There's a cosmic bonk-oif balance. A back door is a logic bomb. A button hook is a hunchback. Ooblik is play sludge. There were published bang paths 10 hops long. Designs succumbing to creeping featureitis are banana problems. I know how to spell banana, but I don't know when to stop. Before you reconfigure, mount a scratch monkey. A dog cow makes a moof. An aliasing bug can smack the stack. Who wrote these tunes, these runes you need black art to parse? Don't think it's only genius, flaming, humor, dry, a briefcase of cerebral dust. A hat's become a swung dash, but the daughter of the programmer will still have periods. It's all about wetware at last, and wetware lives in meat space. There are worlds within worlds. Lucky lucubrations. I love the word lucubration. Thank God an occasion came up to use it. And then to another world, the Retort Room, a poem that Roberto once published, and which I read with thanks to him. The Retort Room is the room in a canning factory. I lived on an island in Maine that had been full of canneries, all of them fallen into disuse. And the Retort Room is the place that the cans of sardines are boiled up or down. It had tottered for years on the water's lip and lap. Some squatter pigeons occupied its nights, dreaming of drowning in glottals. Then suddenly the trucks arrived and hauled away enormous rusted remnants of the cannery's cookery. Inside a week, the great stained concrete that had poured down 50 years and 20 feet into the tide was sheathed up pink in plywood someone trundled from a lumber yard. The whole place bloomed in polyester greenery and sky blue styrofoam. And sure enough, from farther south, with a flourish of romance and a big RV, he brought his wife of decades here to live in dreamland, dead end of the island's eastmost street, so he could twinkle, she abide. The bright new Retort Room, where once upon a time the cans were boiled, now bore his masterwork. Nailed near the Walmart welcome sign, a homemade 6-foot jigged-out replica of Tug, as jaunty as you like, the city cousin of the working ones that chug along the waterside. It was his bid at immortality. We liked him more the more he tried. He beamed past every tiredness of a day, retired by choice, past eking out, past aching in. He shone like someone past the past, with whom resides what conquers all. And that was when she died. Ornithologue at Audubon. Most of you know who undoubtedly are birders and read the back of the bird book as well as the front, that a guy transcribed the bird songs, yea, translated them into English. You set your snares for love songs by the bowerside and brook to bring, as if they were theirs, your own callings back to the bird book, where to this day any fool who reads can find the winged singing things distinguished chiefly by their expertise in English. Take the goldfinch. What peculiar flight of fancy made it say, potato chips? Hadn't it a higher sort of calling to its name? Or were you, sir, by any chance, annuitized by lays? You claim a dove inquires, who cooks for you? It seems the birds are food obsessed. Another specimen is heard to squawk out, quick, 3 beers. And soon the vireo appears impatient too, snapping, quick, quick, give me the rain check. The woods are thick with poet types and Pollyannas, pleased to meet you greeters, a segue artist gone from food to mood with a chip, chip, chipper, or a sweet, sweet, sweet. One bad Wordsworth specializes in the trees, trees, murmuring trees. The masochists are even worse, the pessimists, tenors from hell, the plovers disheartening, quit, quit, quit. The Inca doves, no hope. And thugs who keep on hissing, whip Tom Kelly. God, what's left for a thrasher to do? Whose utterance you render simply one sharp smack. To a lover's mind, I guess that's more or less a kiss. You must have loved as much as punished them. You did not miss the courting eider's human-sounding moan, nor among warblers the black-throated blue zone. Please me, please, please, squeeze me. Estimable sir, desist. Were you delirious or lonely? Maybe married. Or were you unacquainted with the word displacement? Translators are ever undersung, but mark my words, some serious misanthropomorphizing got done to the hapless chachalaca, best of birds, the one whose amorous aptitudes fell into permanent doubt when its females were quoted to cry, keep it up, and its males to reply, cut it out. Here are a couple of poems from Sutung Po, who in a few more years will be 1,000. And so he can do the experience end of the spectrum, I think. Numbers can be numbing. You can't count days the way you do dollars, said Borges. Every day is different. But, of course, numbers The art of numbers, that's poetry. It counts a different way. The Sutung Po poem I'll start with, this guy was a designer, a professional designer of gardens in ancient China, and wrote, as you might expect, pastoral poems, of which I'll read one now. One midnight in the spring, an hour is worth 1,000 golden coins. The moon is shadowed, senses clearly flowering. Upstairs, unwound from flutes and throats, some silken threads of sound. And where the garden holds most still, a swing. For me, the poise of that final image is built out of all those threads. He hangs that swing in all of its suspense and poise, in the old sense of weighted on both sides. From the threads he's drawn from that upstairs room of music, of human voices. There is no human figure in this poem in any manifest form, but it's constantly there as an illusion or a shadow. The stillness against which great motion, against which great motion can come, a kind of trembling in the field. This one, I had the luck that in English, swing is both a noun and a verb. So in its hanging still there, you feel the motion of the human impulse. Sutung Po also wrote, unlike many writers of pastorals or nature-loving getaway artists, he also wrote satires, less often loved by rulers, and was constantly being banished and having to make new gardens in new climates. And I'll give you one of the satires too. This one's on the birth of a son. When a child is born, the parents say they hope it's healthy and intelligent, but as for me, well, vigor and intelligence have wrecked my life. I pray this baby we are seeing walloped, wiped, and winningly anointed turns out dumb as oakum and more sinister. That way, he'll crown a tranquil life by being appointed a cabinet minister. Now you know why he lived in that cold place. Settling song. This is a sort of candle I light for the elders. My remaining one grown too old and ill to get home to where she grew up. I feel some quiet delight, nonetheless, in the wings of the wings that wait inside the word mother, like a glint or a hint of night flight. One who could fly from the rose-closed deck toward starfuls farthest flung of pure, forgetful sky, might take the forks and tributaries in the night afar aloft, only to find herself mistaken. Nothing upward ever brings her nearer. Land's alluring, after all, from there, its oil fields quietly constellatory, suburbs settled by abounding light, abounding glow. And so a soul might settle back toward the old dim beck of bedside, one shade shy of wicked glimmers, there to bide and be, in sight of the flicker of living, in spite of the quicker to die. I already bored the lecturees with my pastor. My pastor right is Stephen, not Jeremiah. And, you know, my mother being old as Methuselah, some days I feel I know exactly how it is. I feel like, when I read Stephen Wright, I thought, I know exactly what this is. He said, when I turned 2, I was really anxious because I doubled my age in a year. I thought, if this keeps up, by the time I'm 6, I'll be 90. Yes. He also had he said, I was in the first submarine. There's another one about how old I feel. He said, I was in the first submarine. Instead of a periscope, they had a kaleidoscope. They kept saying, we're surrounded. I just came here. I don't know how long you guys have been here in this sort of residency. I just came from a 10-day residency where they put us up in undergraduate dorms, the cots of which were all encased in plastic, so that when you turn over in the night, you wake yourself up. It's so crunchy in bed. You know, not the good way crunchy, like not because you had good crackers to eat or anything. And so it is the kind of place where, like, this last thing I'll tell you, Stephen writes, is it's the kind of place where you get up in the morning, it really is true that people say, did you sleep well? And you say, no, I made a few mistakes. Because we'd been in workshops all day, so there was nothing that was unanalyzed anyway. Knock, knock, knocking. If the inquiry itself didn't smack of afterthoughts and gratitude, I'd ask St. Peter for a few elucidations when I get my chance. I'd want to know why sex was always best when I stood to lose the most. Why make it diabolically attractive, this proximity to risk? The patterns ought to favor the protection of the children, but as I recall, it wasn't love inspired our fastest appetites, our meat-racked duty, and our grappling hooks. And now that issue's not the issue, I could use a kindness, not a cattle prod. Dear God, you put a little pain in every club and strut and hoe. Don't now, sweet chariot, refrain from swinging low. All right, just to stay respectable here, I have a little diatribe against the meta-mendacities of postmodernism. That'll bore ya. It's also a carnivore's version of animal rights. Does all this make you want to run out of the room? It's the hopeless entanglement in the many senses of the subject. Philosopher orders crispy pork. I love him so, this creature I do pray was treated kindly. I will pay as much as pig lovers see fit to guarantee him that. As for his fat, I'd give up years, yes, years of my own life for such a gulpable semblable, my life, such as it is, this liberality of leaves. The world won't need those 17 more poems, after all, there being so few subjects to be treated. 3, if by subject we mean anyone submitted to another's will. 2, if by subject we mean topic. 1, if by death we wind up meaning love. And none if a subject must entail the curlicue's indulgence of itself. That wasn't so bad, was it? I promised that man I wouldn't leave this quadrangle. I'm sorry, I lied again. No sex for priests. The horse in harness suffers, he's not feeling up to snuff. The feelers sensate, but the cook pronounces lobsters tough. The chain's too short, the dog's at pains to reach a sheaf of shade. One half a squirrel's whirling there upon the interstate. That ruff around the monkey's eye is cancer. Only God's impervious. He's deaf and blind, but he's not dumb. To answer for it all, his spokesmen aren't allowed to come. Lest I be struck down. See if I can find a humble one. Agape. I mean, on a page, you can't really tell what that word is, right? So let me recast that. Agape. I could fly like a god, went from 0 to 40 and 7 to 5. I could shift for myself, Michelin-ing my time round the work blocks and off days. Took a shine to my chassis and took it uptown, where I saw in a highlight the wreck it appeared. There it stopped in a storefront. The shade of its shape gave me pause. How it gaped! And then lo and behold, from the O of its brain stepped the creature itself. Just a day-numbered ape with a clue it was clay. Fido's wife, a domestic lament. Another dozen surfaces to scrape, the garbage to take out, the papers to take in, the screwdriver to be applied again to newly slime-encrusted soles. No end of mudded floors and wadded bedding, and today, especially, in quantities astounding, underneath the furniture, behind the doors, the fluff and dander left by curs the breeder called Nonshedding. It's a dog's life I have come to lead, day in, day out, with never a Sunday edition, while they lie around on their couches like poets and study the human condition. Truly, I have some serious ones. I don't know what's gotten into me today. I will read just, I'll read 3 more. 3, 4, 3. Dim view. The sun that put its spokes in every wheel of manhandle and tree derives its path of sea shines, sheer centrifugality, from my regards. I send it my regards. Some yards of lumen in the fabrica have come unbolted from the looks of it, or likes of me, a long unweaving or recarding I cannot recall begun. And there, before my eyes, a palm puts lashes round the sun. The gift. From underwater, you can't see a thing above, a sun per se, or a cloud perchance, or a man in a hat in a boat. You see the bottom of the boat. You see the flocks of glitter brilliantly communicating schools. You see the calm translucencies in groves, a sway of peaceful flags, but overall reflective. There's the lid. If that is broken, it will heal immediately. A wetsuit's foot is a shock, or a long black line behind a plummet, or the sudden angling boomerang, myrrh in a hurry to zigzag down. They'll leave, and leave no afterimage, not a sign of high retrieval. If you live above, on solid ground, you see through depths of night, no ceiling sealing us from heaven. The looking opens outward on a universe of sparks, a streaming into countlessness and dust. Along its phosphorescent ways there must, the brain lights up the schoolroom rule, live others like ourselves in worlds as mirror mesmerized as mine, let's say, or hers. And so it was in some mid-umpteenth month of her life's underlife, a mindless, blind metastasis of cells. We sent each other messages by email, sudden, simultaneous, because of dreams. In hers, the ancestors were waiting just across a lake, but she found no equipment in her circumstances of canoe. The paddle on the water drifted far and farther off. She saw it touch my boat, she said. She saw me shove it back across the surface safely to her hand so she could get where she'd be found. Dear God, give me a faith like that. In my dream, we both drowned. What time is it? What latitude is it? Where am I? I mean, how long? Can I do a couple more? Thank you. Not to be dwelled on. I just want to apply a few more cat o' nine tails to my own person before I move on to someone else's real gifts like Basho and Giordano Bruno. Not to be dwelled on. Self-interest cropped up even there the day I hoisted 3 instead of the normally called for 2 spadefuls of loam onto the coffin of my friend. Why shovel more than anybody else? What did I think I'd prove? More love? Mud in her eye? More will to work? Her father what? A shirker? Christ, what wouldn't anybody give? What arm or leg to get that gesture back? She cannot die again, and I do nothing but relive. Basho wrote in the knapsack notebook this little passage that strikes me as immortal, though it begins, in this mortal frame of mine, which is made of 100 bones and 9 orifices. Don't you love that? So much better than the other way around. I always think, unless you prefer leakage to breakage. In this mortal frame of mine, which is made of 100 bones and 9 orifices, there is something, and this something can be called, for lack of a better name, a windswept spirit. For it's much like the thin drapery that is torn and swept away by the slightest stirring of the wind. This something in me took to writing poetry years ago, merely to amuse itself at first, but finally making it its lifelong business. There were times when it sank into such dejection that it was almost ready to drop its pursuit, or again times when it was so puffed up with pride that it exulted in vain victories over others. Indeed, ever since it began to write poetry, it has never found peace with itself, always wavering between doubts of one kind or another. At one time, it wanted to gain security by entering the service of a court. At another, it wished to measure the depth of its ignorance by trying to be a scholar. But it was saved from both by love of art. That's, even when these guys talk about what they're doing what they're doing. Borges was asked, isn't it It must be awful being blind. It's like the CNN interviewer, you know. Mr. Borges, isn't it awful being blind? Tell us how you feel about being blind. And Borges, you know, no occasion is not Borgesian for him. He said, blindness is a limitation, yes, but it's also a liberation, a solitude propitious to invention, a key, and an algebra. So I'll end with a tribute to the many masters who teach me all the time, keep teaching me. What he thought, you'll see the layers of learning and the generations of learning in this one. I owe it immediately to a man named Fabio Doppelher, and you'll see the story. What he thought. We were supposed to do a job in Italy, and full of our feeling for ourselves, our sense of being poets from America. We went from Rome to Fano, met the mayor, mulled a couple matters over. The Italian literati seemed bewildered by the language of America. They asked us, what does flat drink mean? And the mysterious cheap date. No explanation lessened this one's mystery. Among Italian writers, we could recognize our counterparts, the academic, the apologist, the arrogant, the amorous, the brazen, and the glib. And there was one administrator, the conservative in suit of regulation gray, who, like a good tour guide, with measured pace and uninflected tone, narrated sights and histories the hired van hauled us past. Of all, he was most politic and least poetic, so it seemed. Our last few days in Rome, I found a book of poems this unprepossessing one had written. It was there in the pensione room, a room he'd recommended, where it must have been abandoned by the German visitor. Was there a bus of them? To whom he had inscribed and dated it a month before. I couldn't read Italian either, so I put the book back in the wardrobe's dark. We last Americans were due to leave tomorrow. For our parting evening, then, our host chose something in a family restaurant, and there we sat and chatted, sat and chewed, till sensible. It was our last big chance to be poetic, make our mark. One of us asked, what's poetry? Is it the fruits and vegetables and marketplace of Campo dei Fiori, or the statue there? Because I was the glib one, I identified the answer instantly. I didn't have to think. The truth is both. It's both, I blurted out. But that was easy. That was easiest to say. What followed taught me something about difficulty. For our underestimated host spoke out, all of a sudden, with a rising passion. And he said, that statue represents Giordano Bruno, brought to be burned in the public square because of his offense against authority, which was to say the church. His crime was his belief. The universe does not revolve around the human being. God is no fixed point or central government, but rather is poured in waves through all things. All things move. If God is not the soul itself, he is the soul of the world. Such was his heresy. The day they brought him forth to die, they feared he might incite the crowd. The man was famous for his eloquence. And so his captors placed upon his face an iron mask in which he could not speak. That's how they burned him. That is how he died, without a word, in front of everyone. And poetry, we'd all put down our forks by now to listen to the man in gray. He went on softly. Poetry is what he thought but did not say.